You are currently holding a map to a place that doesn't exist. Every book you have ever read on self-improvement, every podcast you have consumed at double speed, and every habit tracker you have meticulously filled out has been leading you toward a specific promise. They promised you that if you just refined the edges of your personality, if you just worked a little harder, slept a little less, and optimized your morning routine, you would eventually reach a state of completion. They promised you the arrival, but look around you. You have been growing for years. You have accumulated more knowledge than the greatest kings of the ancient world. You have hacks for your focus, supplements for your mood, and philosophies for your pain. And yet, there is still that quiet, persistent ache in the center of your chest. The feeling that you are still a draft. The feeling that the real version of your life is perpetually stuck behind a glass wall, just one more breakthrough away. This is the great deception of the modern mind. We have turned the beautiful, messy process of being human into a technical problem to be solved. We have turned our souls into projects and our lives into case studies. We are so busy building the library of who we should be that we have forgotten to walk through the doors of who we are. This book is not another set of instructions on how to fix yourself. It is an invitation to a funeral. We are here to bury the version of you that is waiting to be perfect. We are here to dismantle the infinite library of excuses, theories, and somedays that you have built between yourself and reality. Most people miss the real psychology of growth because they are looking for a ladder to climb. But the truth is much more terrifying and much more liberating. Growth isn't a climb, it is a surrender. It is the moment you realize that the most powerful version of you isn't a person you have to create in the future. It is the person who remains once you stop trying to be someone else. In the chapters that follow, we will walk through the 7 hidden architectures of the mind. We will explore the biology of your dissatisfaction, the logic of your shadows, and the violent beauty of shedding your skin. The doors are open, the candles are lit. But be warned, once you understand the real psychology of growth, you can never go back to the comfort of your illusions. Welcome to the library. Let's begin by burning the map. Chapter 1, The Illusion of the Arrival. We are all born into a race we didn't sign up for. From the moment you are old enough to understand the word better, the world begins to whisper a lie into your ear. It tells you that life is a series of rooms. You are currently in a dark, cramped, and dusty room. But if you study hard enough, work long enough, and grow enough, you will eventually earn the key to the Great Hall. In that hall, the light is golden, the air is sweet, and most importantly, the work is done. We call this the arrival, but look closely at the maps offered by the great thinkers of history. Look at the Stoic scrolls of Marcus Aurelius or the existential weight of Kierkegaard. They all hint at a terrifying, beautiful secret. The Great Hall is a mirage. In the psychology of the human spirit, there is no final version of you. There is no software update that removes the bugs of being human once and for all. Most people miss this because they treat personal growth like a building project. They think they are laying bricks until the house is finished. But you are not a building, you are a river. A river that stops moving isn't finished, it is a swamp. The real psychology of growth begins the moment you realize that the horizon is not a place to be reached, but a direction to be followed. If you are walking toward the sunset, you will never touch the sun, but the walk itself is where the light lives. The agony of the someday. Why does this illusion hurt us so deeply? Because it creates a temporal schism in your mind. You begin to live your life in 2 different timelines. There is the real timeline, where you are currently struggling, tired, and imperfect. And then there is the ideal timeline, where the post-growth you lives. The problem is that you start to hate the real you because it isn't the ideal you yet. This is the hidden violence of modern self-improvement. It teaches you to treat your current self like a failed experiment. You look in the mirror and you don't see a human being, you see a project. You see a set of metrics to be optimized. You see a broken version of a person that needs to be fixed before they are allowed to experience joy. This is why you feel that hollow ache in your chest even when you succeed. Because you've spent so long telling yourself, "I'll be happy when," that when the when finally arrives, your brain doesn't know how to stop waiting. You have trained your dopamine receptors to only fire for the pursuit, never for the possession. We are a generation of people who are masters of the climb, but we have completely forgotten how to stand on the mountain. We are starving for the arrival because we've been told that the current version of us doesn't deserve to sit at the table. The biological trap. Let's look at the mechanics. Why is the human brain so susceptible to this lie? Evolution does not care about your happiness. It cares about your survival. From an evolutionary standpoint, a satisfied human is a dead human. If our ancestors had reached a state of arrival, where they felt they had enough food and enough safety, they would have stopped gathering, stopped hunting, and been eaten by a predator. Nature designed you to be chronically dissatisfied. It gave you hedonic adaptation, the psychological phenomenon where humans quickly return to a stable level of happiness despite major positive or negative events. This is the arrival fallacy in biological terms. When you get the car, the house, or the body, your brain resets the baseline within weeks. The growth you thought would change your life forever becomes the new normal. Most people miss this. They think the new normal means they need to grow more. They think the hunger is a sign of failure. It's not. The hunger is the engine. But if you don't realize the engine is designed to keep running forever, you will drive yourself into a nervous breakdown trying to find the off switch. The architect of dust. Let us look at a man named Elias. Elias was a brilliant architect. His entire life was built on the theology of the next project. When he was a student, he thought, "Once I graduate, I'll be an architect." When he graduated, he thought, "Once I design my first skyscraper, I'll be successful." He spent 20 years in a fever of growth. He read every book on leadership. He optimized his sleep to 5 hours. He cut out frivolous things like art and long walks. He was a machine of personal development. Eventually, he built the tallest building in his city. He stood on the top floor on opening night, looking out over the skyline. He had arrived. But as he stood there, a cold, terrifying thought drifted through his mind. Is this it? The skyscraper didn't make him feel bigger. It made him feel smaller. He realized he had built a monument to a version of himself that didn't exist. He had spent his whole life preparing to live, but he had never actually lived. He had improved his skills, but he had ignored his soul. He was a master of the arrival, standing in a room full of people who admired him, feeling like an absolute ghost. He realized that the real psychology he had missed was this: you cannot build a house large enough to hold the emptiness of a life lived only for the future. Chapter 1 teaches us this: the arrival is a ghost. If you are waiting for a version of yourself that is finished before you start loving your life, you will wait until the day you die. Growth is not the process of reaching a destination. It is the process of expanding your capacity to handle the journey. Stop asking, "When will I get there?" Start asking, "Who am I becoming while I walk?" The library is open, the books are waiting, but the life is happening outside the door. Chapter 2, The Shadow of Competence. There is a dark secret behind your greatest achievements. Your talent is often just a very well-disguised survival mechanism. We live in a world that rewards the competent. We applaud the hyperproductive, the stoic, the relentless, and the perfectionists. We see their success and we call it growth. But if you peel back the layers of high performance, you will often find that it isn't powered by inspiration, it is powered by trauma. We don't run toward our goals, we run away from our shadows. What if the very skills that made you successful are the same ones keeping you trapped? What if your competence is actually a cage built to protect a version of you that is still afraid? Most people miss this because they are too busy admiring the shine of the armor to notice the person suffocating inside it. The tragedy of human development is that we often mistake compensation for evolution. When we are young and the world feels chaotic or rejecting, we develop a superpower to survive. If you felt invisible, you learned to be loud and impressive. If you felt unsafe, you learned to be hypervigilant and controlling. If you felt unloved, you learned to be the perfect person who never makes a mistake. These traits become your identity. You call it being a leader, being organized, or having high standards. But because these skills were born out of a need to escape a feeling of inadequacy, they have no off switch. You cannot stop working because if you stop, the feeling of being not enough will catch up to you. This is the shadow of competence. It is a growth that has no roots in joy, only in fear. It leads to the most successful, most competent people in the world feeling like total frauds. You are high-achieving, yes, but you are also a high-functioning prisoner of your own strengths. You aren't using your skills are using you. To understand this, we must look at the neurochemistry of the achiever's loop. When you use a skill to overcome a perceived threat, even a psychological one, your brain releases a flood of dopamine and cortisol. The cortisol is the stress that drove you. The dopamine is the reward for surviving the task. Over time, your brain becomes addicted to this cycle. You begin to seek out stress and problems to solve just so you can feel the relief of being competent again. This is why relaxing feels like a threat to you. To your nervous system, standing still feels like being a target. You have optimized your life for output because you are terrified of your input, the quiet thoughts that arrive when the work stops. Real growth requires the courage to be incompetent again, to step out of the skills you've mastered and face the emptiness they were designed to hide. The architect of control, consider a woman named Sarah, a world-class project manager. She is the person everyone calls when things are falling apart. She is the fixer. Her competence is legendary. She can organize 1,000 moving parts with clinical precision. On the surface, Sarah is the poster child for personal growth. She has mastered her time, her emotions, and her environment. But Sarah's growth started at age 7 when she had to manage her household because her parents were emotionally absent. Her competence was a desperate attempt to create safety in a world that felt dangerous. Now, at 35, Sarah is burnt out. Why? Because she cannot delegate a single task. She cannot trust anyone. She is too good at her job to ever let it go. Her skill is her greatest asset, but it is also the wall that prevents her from having a real relationship or a moment of peace. Sarah doesn't have a career. She has a complex defense mechanism that she gets paid for. She hasn't grown, she has just expanded her fortress. The shadow of competence is the point where your strengths become your limitations. True personal growth isn't about getting better at the things you use to protect yourself. It's about having the strength to lay those tools down. If your success is fueled by a need to prove your worth, you will never be successful enough to feel worthy. Chapter 3: The Friction of Ego Death. To become the person you long to be, you must first be willing to murder the person you currently are. Most people approach personal growth as an addition, a new habit, a new skill, a new layer of polish. But true transformation is not an addition, it is a subtraction. It is a violent shedding of the skin. We speak of change as if it is a gentle transition, but the psyche experiences change as a funeral. For the new self to be born, the old self, the one that kept you safe, the one you've known your entire life, must die. Most people miss this because they are looking for an upgrade, but they are terrified of the deletion. The reason you feel stuck, despite all your reading and planning, isn't a lack of information. It is a lack of grief. You are clinging to a version of yourself that is familiar, even if that version is miserable. Your ego would rather be right about being a failure than wrong about being a success. We identify with our struggles. We wear our limitations like a comfortable, tattered coat. We say, "I'm just not the kind of person who," or "I've always been bad at." These aren't just descriptions, they are anchors. When you try to grow without ego death, you are essentially trying to fly while refusing to let go of the ground. This creates a psychological friction, an internal war where one part of you is screaming for the light, while the other part is desperately clinging to the shadows because the shadows are where you feel safe. You aren't afraid of failing, you are afraid of the person you will have to become to succeed because you don't recognize that person yet. The neurological resistance to change. From a neurological perspective, your identity is a set of highly reinforced neural pathways. Your brain is a master of efficiency. It wants to keep using the same roads it has traveled for decades. When you attempt a radical shift in your personality or life, your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, interprets this change as a threat to your survival. To the biological brain, unknown equals dangerous. This is why, the moment you decide to change your life, you suddenly feel a surge of anxiety, self-doubt, and the urge to self-sabotage. It is the ego's immune response. It is trying to save the old you from being erased. True growth requires you to override this biological alarm. You have to walk into the fire of your own discomfort and stay there until the old neural pathways are starved of attention and the new ones begin to take root. You have to endure the void, that terrifying middle ground where the old you is gone, but the new you hasn't arrived yet. The artist of the safe path, think of a man named Julian. Julian was a gifted student, a man who built his entire ego on being the smartest person in the room. He was praised for his intellect, his potential, and his safe, prestigious career in law. But Julian hated the law. He wanted to be a creator, a risk-taker, an entrepreneur. He read every book on the leap, but he never jumped. Why? Because to jump meant he had to stop being the smart lawyer. He had to be willing to be a bad beginner. He had to kill the identity that gave him status in exchange for an identity that offered him nothing but uncertainty. Julian spent 10 years in the friction. He was too miserable to stay, but too attached to his ego to leave. He wanted the CEO title without the failed founder experience. He eventually realized that his potential was actually a prison. It was only when he finally accepted that the smart lawyer had to die and that his friends and family might see him as a failure for a while, that he was finally free to build something real. Ego. Death is the price of admission for a new life. You cannot carry your old excuses into your new territory. Growth is a cycle of death and rebirth. If you are not willing to let go of who you were, you will never meet who you could be. The friction you feel isn't a sign to stop. It's the sound of your old self resisting the flame. Chapter 4, The Logic of Slow Violence. We are obsessed with the big bang of transformation, the epiphany, the sudden breakthrough, the overnight success. But real psychology isn't a lightning bolt. It is slow violence. It is the violent, relentless grinding down of your current limitations through the sheer force of repetition. We live in a culture that worships the hack, the shortcut that promises the result without the resistance. But in the architecture of the soul, the resistance is the result. Growth is what happens when you decide to be bored, tired, and uninspired, and you do it anyway. Most people miss this because they are looking for a spark, but the forest only grows through the slow, silent work of the roots. The modern world has tricked you into believing that if a change isn't visible, it isn't happening. This is why we quit. We go to the gym for a week, we read 10 pages of a difficult book, we try to be mindful for 3 days, and when the mirror looks the same and our minds are still chaotic, we stop. We feel betrayed by the process. This gestation gap is where most potential goes to die. You are suffering from chronological myopia, the inability to see the compounding power of time. You want the moment of impact, but you refuse the season of pressure. By seeking the fast route, you bypass the very friction required to temper your character. A sword that is heated and cooled instantly is brittle. A sword that is folded 1,000 times is unbreakable. When you skip the slow violence of the daily grind, you aren't saving time. You are ensuring that your growth will be shallow and temporary. The myelin of mastery. To understand why slow is the only way to great, we have to look at myelin. Myelin is the fatty tissue that wraps around the nerve fibers in your brain. Every time you repeat a specific action or thought pattern, a new layer of myelin is added. Insulating the circuit and making the signal faster and stronger, myelin doesn't care about your passion. It doesn't care about your why. It only cares about repetition. There is no hack for myelination. You cannot think your way into a stronger neural circuit. You have to earn it through the physical tax of repetition. This is the biological reality of personal growth. Your brain is literally being physically reconstructed, molecule by molecule, every time you choose the difficult path over the easy one. The violence isn't against the world, it is against your own biological laziness. Every day you show up when you don't want to, you are adding a layer of armor to your mind. The sculptor of the plateau. Consider a writer named Marcus. Marcus had big bang dreams. He wanted to write the great American novel. Every few months, he would get a burst of inspiration, lock himself in a room for 48 hours, and write 10,000 words. Then, he would burn out and not touch the keyboard for 90 days. He spent 5 years in this cycle of inspiration and collapse. He had plenty of growth spurts, but he had no growth. It was only when Marcus accepted the slow violence that things changed. He committed to writing exactly 500 words a day, no more, no less, even when the words were dust, even when he felt like a fraud. For the first 6 months, he felt like he was failing. He saw no progress, he felt no glow. But the myelin was building, his brain was becoming a writing machine. 3 years later, he didn't just have a book, he had a self that was capable of finishing what it started. He realized that the masterpiece wasn't the book on the shelf, it was the discipline he had forged in the silence of the plateau. The logic of slow violence is the understanding that massive change is the byproduct of tiny, invisible victories. You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. Stop looking for the giant leap and start looking for the steady pressure. Growth is a marathon run in the dark. The finish line only appears to those who have learned to love the sound of their own footsteps. Chapter 5. The Paradox of Self-Acceptance. You cannot transform a version of yourself that you fundamentally despise. We are taught that self-hatred is a fuel. We believe that if we are brutal enough with our flaws, if we wake up and look in the mirror with disgust, that disgust will provide the energy we need to change. We think shame is a whip that will drive us toward greatness, but shame is a toxic propellant. It burns hot, but it destroys the engine it powers. The great paradox of the human psyche is that radical change only becomes possible the moment you stop demanding it as a condition for your own worth. Most self-help is actually a form of socially acceptable self-mutilation. We approach personal growth from a place of deficit. We tell ourselves, I am broken and I will only be worthy of love and respect once I am fixed. This creates a state of internal war. When you grow out of hate, you are building a skyscraper on a foundation of quicksand. Every flaw you add makes the collapse more inevitable. Think about the exhaustion you feel. That isn't from the work, it's from the war. It's the energy required to constantly hide your real self while trying to manufacture an ideal self. When you refuse to accept where you are, you lose the ability to see clearly. You become so blinded by who you want to be that you cannot accurately diagnose the person you are. You are trying to navigate a map while refusing to admit your current coordinates. You cannot leave a place you haven't arrived at yet. The cortisol of criticism. Neurologically, self-criticism triggers the same threat response in the brain as a physical attack from a predator. When you insult yourself, your brain releases cortisol and activates the amygdala. Here is the problem. Cortisol shuts down the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for creativity, logic, and long-term planning. By shaming yourself into growing, you are literally disabling the very tools you need to succeed. You are trying to learn while your brain is in survival mode. Self-acceptance, however, activates the parasympathetic nervous system. It lowers the internal noise. It doesn't mean saying, "I'm perfect and don't need to change." It means saying, "I am here, I am flawed. And I am safe." Only when the brain feels safe can it move out of defense and into exploration. Acceptance is not the finish line, it is the starting block. It is the realization that you are a work in progress and a masterpiece at the same time. The mirror of malice. Consider a man named Simon. Simon was obsessed with optimizing his social skills. He felt he was too awkward, too quiet, and too uncharismatic. Every night, he would replay his conversations, cringing at every stutter and every silence. He treated his personality like a broken piece of software that needed to be rewritten. The more he hated his awkwardness, the more awkward he became. Because he was so focused on not being himself, he was never present. He was a spectator in his own life, constantly grading his performance. His growth only began when he did the most terrifying thing possible. He accepted his awkwardness. He started saying to himself, "I'm a bit clunky in conversation, and that's okay." The moment he stopped fighting the awkward Simon, the tension evaporated. His prefrontal cortex came back online. He became funnier, more relaxed, and more genuine, not because he fixed himself, but because he stopped trying to hide himself. He realized that the version of him he was trying to kill was actually the one holding the keys to his charisma. The paradox of self-acceptance is the truth that you must be on your own side to win the battle. Shame is a cage, acceptance is the key. You do not need to be better to be worthy. You need to feel worthy so that you have the energy to become better. Stop trying to beat yourself into a new shape and start allowing yourself to grow into your true one. If you treated your best friend the way you treat yourself, would they still be your friend? Chapter 6. The architect of environment. We have a romantic obsession with willpower. We love the image of the lone hero, gritting their teeth, resisting temptation through sheer mental strength. But in the cold reality of psychology, willpower is a leak, and environment is the ocean. Most people fail to grow not because they are weak, but because they are trying to plant a garden in a desert and blaming the seeds for not blooming. You are not a solitary island of consciousness. You are a biological organism that is constantly, silently reacting to the cues around you. If you have to choose between your intentions and your surroundings will win 99% of the time. Stop trying to be a stronger person and start being a better architect. We live in an age designed to strip you of your agency. Every app, every grocery store aisle, and every social circle is an environment engineered by experts to keep you distracted, hungry, and small. When you try to grow without changing your environment, you are engaging in a war of attrition that you cannot win. You are trying to be a philosopher in a casino. You are trying to be an athlete in a candy store. This creates a state of permanent decision fatigue. Because your environment is constantly pulling you backward, you have to use all your mental energy just to stay still. By the time you actually need to do the work of growth, your willpower battery is dead. You aren't lazy, you are just exhausted from fighting a battle that shouldn't even be happening. The ecology of the choice architecture. In behavioral economics, there is a concept called choice architecture. It suggests that the way an option is presented to you determines the choice you make. Your brain is a path of least resistance machine. It doesn't want to find the best thing to do, it wants to find the easiest thing to do. If your phone is on your desk while you work, your brain has to expend energy not to look at it. Even if you don't touch it, that not looking consumes glucose and weakens your focus. True growth happens when you stop fighting your biology and start hacking it. You must design your ecology of success. This means making the behaviors you want, like reading or creating, high visibility and low friction, while making the behaviors you want to avoid, like mindless scrolling, invisible and high friction. You don't need more discipline, you need a world that doesn't require you to be disciplined. You are the product of the 5 miles around you and the 5 ideas inside you. The cage of the old self. Consider a man named David who wanted to stop drinking. David had arrived at a place of total conviction. He read the books, he went to the meetings, and he made the vows. But every Friday night, David went to the same bar with the same friends who had known him as the life of the party for a decade. In that room, David wasn't a man in growth. He was an old version of David, trapped in a cage made of other people's expectations. The smell of the room, the rhythm of the music, and the social pressure of his peers were cues that his brain couldn't ignore. David didn't fail because he was weak. He failed because he tried to maintain a new self in an old environment. His growth only began when he realized he had to change his social architecture. He had to find new rooms where his sobriety was the baseline, not the exception. He realized that you cannot heal in the same environment that made you sick. He stopped being a fighter and started being an arranger. The architect of environment is the realization that your surroundings are either a wind at your back or a wall in your face. Willpower is a finite resource. Design is an infinite one. If you want to change your life, change your landscape. Stop blaming your character and start auditing your kitchen, your bedroom, your phone, and your friends. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your environment. If your environment was designed to make you fail, would you even know it? Chapter 7, The Infinite Library, the final awakening. Information is not transformation. We are the most informed generation in human history, yet we are arguably the least transformed. We have built a digital cathedral of knowledge, the infinite library, where every secret to happiness, wealth, and peace is available at the click of a button. But there is a hidden trap in the archive. Collecting the map is not the same as walking the terrain. Most people miss this because they mistake the sensation of learning for the act of growing. You don't need another book, you need a confrontation with reality. We have become architects of the abstract. We spend hundreds of hours listening to podcasts about discipline while sitting on a couch. We watch deep videos about focus while having 17 tabs open. This is procrastination in disguise. It feels like work. It tastes like progress. It gives us a hit of dopamine that makes us feel like we've accomplished something, when all we've really done is rearrange the furniture in our minds. This is the consumer's coma. We hoard wisdom like dragons hoarding gold. It sits in our mental vaults, shining and useless. We use the infinite library to hide from our lives. As long as we are researching, we don't have to risk failing. As long as we are preparing, we don't have to face the terrifying possibility that we might not be as good as we think we are. We are waiting for a level of certainty that never comes. We have turned growth into a spectator sport. The neurological mirage of pseudo-action in neuroscience. There is a phenomenon where the brain struggles to distinguish between thinking about a task and doing a task in terms of emotional reward. When you plan a workout, your brain releases a small amount of dopamine, the reward molecule. This is dangerous. If you get the reward just for planning, you lose the biological drive to actually perform. You have tricked your reward system. This leads to analysis paralysis. Your brain becomes addicted to the theory and repelled by the practice. The real psychology of growth demands a neural shift from consumption to contribution. Real wisdom is only found in the feedback loop of action. When you do something, the world hits back. That hit is the only data that matters. Pain, failure, and embarrassment are the only teachers whose lessons actually stick to your ribs. The library can give you the theory of fire, but only the flame can melt the iron. The curator of someday, think of a man named Leo. Leo was a scholar of high performance. He knew every Stoic quote by heart. He could explain the intricacies of dopamine fasting and deep work better than a neuroscientist. He had a shelf full of journals filled with insights, but Leo's life was stagnant. He lived in the same apartment, worked the same uninspiring job, and had the same unresolved conflicts. He was a library king. Every time life got hard, Leo didn't act, he bought another book. He was searching for the magic key, the one piece of information that would finally make action feel safe. His awakening only happened when he realized that the infinite library was actually his prison. He took his journals and his self-help books and put them in a box in the attic. He made a rule: no more input until there is output. He stopped reading about difficult conversations and actually had one. He stopped researching side hustles and made his first $5. He realized that a single, clumsy action is worth more than 1,000 perfect theories. He stopped being a curator of other people's lives and became the author of his own. The infinite library is the final boss of personal growth. It is the realization that knowledge is a rumor until it is lived. You do not need more information, you need more courage. The real psychology behind growth is that it only happens in the arena, covered in dust and sweat. Close the book, shut down the video, step out of the library. Your life is waiting for you to stop studying it and start living it. The doors of the library are closing. What will you do with the silence? You have spent these chapters wandering through the corridors of your own mind. You have seen the illusions you've built, the shadows you've hidden in, and the architectural traps that have kept you small. You have touched the maps and felt the weight of the volumes on the shelves, but now we have reached the end of the hall. There are no more chapters. There are no more hidden secrets. There are no more psychological revelations waiting to save you. Ahead of you lies only a single, heavy wooden door. It doesn't lead to another wing of the library. It leads outside. This is the moment most people fail. Most people will finish this book, feel a brief surge of intellectual clarity, and then immediately turn back. They will look for a new book, a new video, or a new teacher to explain the world to them again. They will choose the comfort of the library over the chaos of the arena, because inside these walls, you can never truly fail. Inside the library, you are always preparing, but a life lived in preparation is a life that never began. The real psychology of personal growth isn't something you know. It's something you are when no one is watching and there is no how-to guide in your hand. It is the choice you make when you are tired. It is the honesty you maintain when a lie would be easier. It is the courage to be a bad beginner in a world obsessed with polished masters. As you leave this place, remember this: the library will always be here. The wisdom of the ages will always be waiting on the shelves, but wisdom is a static thing. It is cold ink on cold paper. Only you can give it breath. Only you can turn these concepts into flesh and blood. The greatest book ever written in the history of the world is currently unwritten. It is the story of what you do next. It is the story of how you handle the plateau, how you face your shadow, and how you design a life that doesn't require you to escape from it. Stop looking for the light at the end of the tunnel. Be the light. The door is unlocked. The handle is in your hand. Don't look back. There is nothing left for you here.